There is a paradox at the heart of wealth. The single most reliable force for building it, compounding, is also the one most people never benefit from. They know the formula, they've seen the charts, they nod when someone mentions exponential growth, and yet, year after year, accounts stall, balances get raided, investments are switched out, and the curve that should be bending upward keeps resetting to zero. If compounding is so simple, why do so many fail at it? The answer is not a math problem, it is a behavior problem. It is a story about time, attention, emotion, and design. Compounding is patient magic, small inputs multiplied by long horizons. It turns ordinary savers into quiet millionaires not because they find extraordinary returns, but because they refuse to interrupt the process. The majority fail because they treat compounding like an event instead of a system. They start and stop, they chase and switch, they seek excitement instead of endurance. They ignore the dull infrastructure that protects fragile momentum. To understand why 99% fail at compounding, we need to examine the frictions that break it and the habits that let it run. The first friction is time myopia. Human brains are built for the immediate and the visible. We feel today, we imagine tomorrow. The brain discounts the future aggressively. Psychologists call this hyperbolic discounting, which means $1 of pleasure now feels worth far more than several dollars of benefit later. Compounding lives entirely in later. The first years produce small, almost insulting results. You contribute $100 a month for a year and see $1,200 plus a handful of gains. It feels like you are lifting a mountain with a teaspoon. Most people quit here because the curve is still flat. They assume the smallness today predicts the smallness forever. In reality, the curve hides its power until you cross an invisible threshold where growth from growth overtakes contributions. The secret is not motivation, but scaffolding, automations that keep you contributing long after the initial excitement fades. The second friction is interruption. Compounding hates being interrupted. Every withdrawal, every temporary pause, every panic sale resets the clock. The math is brutal. A portfolio that compounds at 8% for 30 years doubles roughly every 9 years. If you pull out a chunk in year 7 to fund something you didn't plan, the lost future growth on that chunk can equal more than the original amount. People think they can catch up later. Later rarely arrives because expenses inflate to match income and emergencies remain evergreen. The antidote is boring but effective. Separate an emergency fund from investments so you don't need to sell assets to fix a car or replace a boiler. Protect compounding with cash padding. Cash is the bodyguard that keeps your future self on stage. The third friction is fees and frictional drag. A single percentage point shaved from returns by high-cost products, frequent trading, or advisor layers can cost 6 figures over a career. The mind resists this truth because 1% feels small. Compounding magnifies small. If you earn 7% instead of 8% for 30 years, the end result is not a 1% difference. It can be hundreds of thousands less on the same contributions. Many fail at compounding not because they picked the wrong investment, but because they chose an expensive path to the right one. Low-cost, broad funds remove most of this drag. So does the decision to minimize turnover. Your portfolio should collect dividends and growth, it should not collect fees. The fourth friction is noise. Markets produce a constant stream of information designed for traders, not compounding savers. Headlines frame every movement as urgent. Social feeds elevate the loudest opinions. Your attention is harvested, and your anxiety becomes someone else's profit. Compounding requires long stretches of boredom and inaction. Noise punishes exactly those behaviors. The result is fiddling, small changes that feel productive, like moving money to the hot sector or selling during a dip to wait for clarity. Each tweak creates taxes, spreads, and mistakes. Each tweak interrupts the calm contributions that actually matter. The quiet investor wins not by knowing more news, by reading less of it and rereading their own plan. The fifth friction is misaligned risk. Compounding needs a portfolio you can hold through storms. Too aggressive, and you will panic sell at the exact moment future gains are on sale. Too conservative, and your real returns, after inflation and taxes, will be too low to let compounding work. Many people fail not because they lack discipline, but because they set a risk level that their nervous system cannot tolerate. They only learn their true tolerance in a crash, which is the most expensive classroom available. The solution is humility. Pick a diversified mix with enough growth to beat inflation and enough balance to sleep. Write, in advance, how you will behave when the market falls 30%. If your plan requires a version of you that does not get scared, it is not a plan, it is a wish. The sixth friction is lifestyle inflation. Compounding thrives on the gap between what you earn and what you keep. When income rises, the world offers infinite ways to absorb it. Nicer housing, nicer transport, nicer everything. If every raise becomes a fixed cost, contributions stagnate. Worse, your dependency on current income increases, which makes you more likely to raid investments when income dips. Compounding is protected by a savings rate that rises over time, captured before your lifestyle learns the new number. Quiet wealth builders automate a rule: when income goes up, contributions go up. The habit locks in growth without daily willpower battles. The seventh friction is the wrong scoreboard. Many people seek entertainment and social status from their investing. They compare short-term performance with friends, they hunt for alpha that can be displayed. Compounding is not a performance sport, it is an endurance practice. The scoreboard is internal: contributions made as promised, costs kept low, risk maintained, rebalancing honored, taxes minimized, emergencies handled without selling. When your identity is tied to beating a benchmark this quarter, you will dismantle your own compounding to chase it. When your identity is tied to keeping promises to your future self, you will be indifferent to monthly noise and loyal to decades. The eighth friction is overconfidence and its sibling, market timing. Humans are pattern-seeking. We feel smart when we act. The temptation to go to cash and wait, to rotate into winners, or to sell now and buy lower has destroyed more compounding than recessions ever did. Timing requires getting two decisions right: when to get out and when to get back in. And the second is psychologically harder than the first because the news is scarier near bottoms. The missed best days tend to cluster near the worst days. Sitting out those rebounds drastically reduces long-term returns. A policy of dollar-cost averaging and scheduled rebalancing neuters the urge to guess. You won't exit at tops or buy at bottoms, and you won't need to. Compounding does the heavy lifting if you stop interrupting it. The ninth friction is taxation and account placement. Compounding works on after everything returns. If you place tax-inefficient assets in taxable accounts, churn funds, or realize gains unnecessarily, you are tipping your compounding to the tax collector every year. The stealthy compounding setup is simple: hold broadly diversified low-turnover funds, reinvest distributions, place income-heavy assets where tax-advantaged space exists, harvest losses thoughtfully to offset gains where the rules allow, and avoid realizing gains unless they support a larger plan. You don't need wizardry, just fewer taxable events and more time for net growth to build on itself. The 10th friction is the absence of a cash moat. We touched on emergency funds earlier, but it is worth separating as its own failure mode. When you invest every spare dollar and hold nothing back, you feel efficient in good times and desperate at the first wobble. Desperation leads to forced selling. Forced selling kills compounding because it locks in losses that a slightly larger cash buffer would have converted into future gains. Cash is not the enemy of compounding, it is the ally that prevents self-sabotage. A boring, labeled buffer is a strategic asset, not an indictment of your courage. The 11th friction is complexity creep. People confuse sophistication with effectiveness. They add satellite funds, factor tilts, thematic slices, and alternative assets they barely understand. Complexity multiplies decisions. Decisions multiply errors. Each new product comes with its own cycle of "should I still hold this?", which invites tinkering and increases the chance of bailing at the wrong time. The compounding-friendly portfolio is the one you can describe on a napkin and execute while tired. A core global stock fund, a core bond fund, and automation. Sophisticated simplicity is not a compromise, it is a moat around your behavior.
The 12th friction is narrative seduction. Every era has a story about why this time is different. Sometimes it contains useful truths. Often it contains excuses to abandon discipline. In bubbles, the story is that fundamentals no longer matter and extraordinary returns are a right. In bear markets, the story is that markets are broken for a generation and never coming back. Both stories end the same way. Investors break their own compounding by buying late and selling low. You don't need to be immune to stories, you need a stronger one. I am an owner of productive assets. I collect their earnings. I add regularly. I let volatility pay me for my patience. Repeat it when the world shouts its contrary tales. The 13th friction is the absence of contribution growth. Compounding is not only returns raised to time, it is also contributions raised to income. The first years of saving are dominated by what you add, not what the market does. Failing to increase contributions as your career advances leaves enormous potential on the table. A small raise capture policy, say channeling half of every raise to investments, expands the base on which compounding operates. What feels like a modest choice today becomes a compounding force 10 years from now. The 14th friction is sequence risk and withdrawal discipline. For those nearing or in retirement, compounding can fail if early bad years force high withdrawals. The mitigation is structural. Keep several years of withdrawals in lower volatility assets. Consider flexible spending rules that tighten in bad markets and relax in good ones, and diversify income sources beyond market withdrawals, such as part-time work or laddered bonds. Compounding does not end at retirement, it changes form. The same patience that built the portfolio must steward it. The 15th friction is the emotional cost of boredom. Markets reward boredom, but boredom is psychologically uncomfortable. Many investors seek stimulation elsewhere and smuggle it back into their portfolio. Day trading, options, leverage, exotic products sold with confident stories. Some survive it, many do not. If you crave novelty, quarantine it. Create a tiny fun sleeve that cannot sink the ship. Treat it like entertainment, not a plan. Let the other 95 to 99% compound in peace. Beyond these frictions lie the deeper psychological currents. Loss aversion, which makes a 10% drop feel twice as painful as a 10% gain feels good. Anchoring, which ties your expectations to a past price. Recency bias, which convinces you that the last 6 months will repeat forever. And the house money effect, which tempts you to gamble gains more aggressively than you would hard-earned cash. These biases are not character flaws. They are human defaults in a noisy world. The way out is design. You automate where you are weak, pre-commit where you are tempted, and choose environments that normalize patience rather than performance. So how do you become the 1% who actually captures compounding? You build a system that runs even when you don't feel like running. You define your horizon in writing and make it longer than the news cycle. You separate cash for surprises from investments for the future, so you never have to sell what you meant to keep. You automate contributions on payday and lock in increases with each raise. You pick a low-cost, diversified core and reduce decisions to a calendar event called rebalance. You choose a savings rate that honors both your present life and your future life, then defend it. You measure success by kept promises, not by quarterly comparisons. You put your curiosity into skills and relationships, and keep your portfolio boring. You train your attention on your plan instead of headlines. You use checklists in storms. You accept that volatility is the price of admission and compounding is the show. Consider a simple example. 2 friends each invest €300 a month starting at age 25. One chases ideas, trades often, and steps to the sidelines during scary headlines, earning 5% net after frictions. The other automates into a low-cost global fund and never interrupts, earning 8%. After 30 years, the first has about €250,000. The second has about €450,000. Same contributions, same economy, different behavior. Now imagine the second friend also increased contributions by €50 with each promotion. The gap becomes a chasm. Nothing glamorous happened, a plan ran. A second example shows the power of not interrupting. An investor adds €5,000 a year for 10 years, then stops. Another investor waits 10 years, then adds €5,000 a year for 20 years. Who ends with more at age 65, assuming the same return? Often, the first investor wins because the earliest dollars had the most time to grow. The point is not to encourage stopping, it is to show how front-loading time and refusing to interrupt can outweigh even longer periods of contributing later. Compounding is skewed toward the early and the uninterrupted. If you want a practical on-ramp, take an afternoon to set the pieces. Open a high-yield savings account and label it Shock Absorber. Fund it to the point where small emergencies don't touch your investments. Write a one-page investment policy: what you own, how much you add, how you rebalance, and how you behave in crashes. Choose a low-cost global stock fund and a sensible bond complement. Set automatic contributions on payday. Create a raise capture rule that increases contributions before your lifestyle learns new numbers. Install a password manager, enable two-factor authentication, and turn off one-click shopping. Put a 15-minute money review on your calendar every Friday with a cup of coffee. Tell one trusted person your plan so they can loan you their calm when headlines shout. Then let the system carry you while you live your life. The truth is, compounding is not exciting in the middle. It is quiet years of ordinary contributions, months that look indistinguishable, a portfolio that you check less often than your email. It is also the closest thing to financial magic that ordinary people have. Most fail because our economy monetizes distraction, and our brains prefer immediacy. You can opt out of that by opting into design. Build the rails, set the cadence, and step back. Give your money the one gift most people never give it: time without interference. In a decade, it will look like luck. In 2, it will look like genius. You will know it was neither. It was compounding, finally allowed to work.